Hello, fight fans. Thanks for joining us at MMA Insider. Before we get rolling with today's news, show some love by hitting that like button and subscribing. Now let's uncover the latest happenings in MMA. Starting off, Alexander Volkanovski claims his next fight at featherweight will be for the title. Moving on, Leon Edwards predicts pivotal Michael Venom Page versus Ian Garry UFC 303 clash. Next, Michael Chandler assures Conor McGregor main event is on despite recent UFC 303 uncertainty. Moving on, Luke Rockhold slams former UFC middleweight champion Sean Strickland. Lastly, Dana White went off on Jake Paul for fighting Mike Tyson. UFC star Alexander Volkanovski has stated that he believes his next fight at featherweight will be for the world title. There's no denying that Alexander Volkanovski is one of the best featherweight fighters of all time. In fact, you could argue he was once considered to be one of the greatest of all time in a general UFC sense. Alas, after losses to Islam Makhachev and Ilia Topuria, he needs to head back to the drawing board. In terms of what's next, nobody knows for sure. Of course, Volkanovski is eager to get back his belt back, and an immediate rematch with Ilia would certainly make sense. In a recent interview, Volkanovski spoke about what's next for him inside the octagon. Here is what he said. "My next fight at featherweight will be for the title. It's just the time. Obviously, I wanted to wait. I don't know what exactly are the plans. I haven't been hounding the UFC, just sort of been taking it easy. So I don't know if they got plans. I know for a fact my next fight is for the title. Maybe if Dustin Poirier wants to, that would be an incredible fight. Obviously, he's a good dude with a lot of respect for each other. Big name, very, very fun fight. That's something, and I just thought I'd put feelers out so you never know. Lightweight division looks good, but my next featherweight fight is for the belt." What should be next for the former champion? UFC welterweight champion Leon Edwards is keeping a keen eye on the upcoming UFC 303 clash between rising welterweights Michael Page and Ian Garry. Edwards will defend the welterweight belt against surging contender Belal Muhammad at UFC 304 in Manchester. He returns to defend the belt after a unanimous decision victory over Colby Covington at UFC 296 in December. A few weeks earlier at UFC 303, Page and Garry will help kick off the pay-per-view main card at an event headlined by Conor McGregor. Page will make his second UFC appearance against Garry, the unbeaten former Cage Warriors title holder. Edwards is more focused on Muhammad Shavkat Rakhmonov and the top 5 contenders in the division at the moment, but he's interested in how Page versus Garry plays out. In a recent interview, Edwards predicted Page versus Garry. Here's what he said: "I feel like it's one of these fights where both guys will play range, not committing and waiting to counterpunch each other. Maybe it could be one of those fights. If I had to put money on it, I would probably favor Page. Probably. It'll be a good fight, and I'm interested to see how it plays out. If they both keep winning, 100% they're on my radar." Page made his UFC debut by defeating Kevin Holland at UFC 299 in March. He signed with the UFC after a long, accomplished tenure in Bellator. Garry is unbeaten in his UFC career after recent wins over Jeff Neal and Neil Magny. He could potentially be 1 or 2 wins away from a title shot, depending on how things play out. UFC star Michael Chandler quelled some fears of his upcoming Conor McGregor fight not coming to fruition on June 29th. Chandler and McGregor are scheduled to headline the UFC's International Fight Week event at UFC 303 in Las Vegas. The fight has been in the works and discussed for almost 2 full years and is now just weeks away. Ahead of fight night, things took a turn for the uncertain after Monday's UFC 303 pre-fight press conference in Dublin was canceled due to undisclosed reasons. Speculation ran rampant online that McGregor had suffered an injury or another incident had occurred that put the fight in jeopardy. After a whirlwind week of eerie social media posts, fear, and speculation, Chandler assures fans that McGregor is all systems go for UFC 303. Here is what he said: "The fight's happening. Where we are right now, there's a lot of speculation, but the fight is on. June 29th, it's happening." McGregor indirectly assured fans that UFC 303 remains intact after posting a series of sparring footage clips on his social media. McGregor and Chandler are both looking to get back in the win column after losses in their last fights. McGregor hasn't fought since snapping his leg against Dustin at UFC 264. Chandler lost to Poirier in his last UFC outing at UFC 281. His holdout for the McGregor fight included their time coaching opposite each other on the Ultimate Fighter 31. While there are still plenty more questions than answers regarding UFC 303, Chandler's remarks should be encouraging to fight fans. As of now, one of the year's biggest fights will move forward as UFC 303 draws close. Former UFC middleweight champion Luke Rockhold has nothing but disdain for Sean Strickland. The 39-year-old is fresh off a knockout victory over Joe Schilling in late April at Karate Combat 45. That win was Luke Rockhold's first since a stoppage victory over David Branch in September 2017. In the years following that win, the former champion suffered 3 straight UFC losses. Rockhold ultimately retired after a loss to Paulo Costa in late 2022. However, it seems that Luke Rockhold is ready to make a UFC comeback. Earlier this week, the former middleweight champion called to face Sean Strickland in his return. For his part, Sean Strickland is fresh off a split decision win over Paulo Costa earlier this month at UFC 302. It's worth noting that Rockhold and Strickland have a history as former training partners. The two were also scheduled to fight at UFC 268 in November 2021, but Luke Rockhold withdrew due to injury. It seems that the two middleweights have some bad blood stemming from that bout cancellation. After Rockhold offered to face Sean Strickland earlier this week, the latter issued a scathing response on social media. Now, Luke Rockhold has responded to Sean Strickland's comments in a recent interview. There, the former UFC title holder stated that Sean Strickland was a fraud who liked to talk about fighting to the death in the cage. However, once actually inside, Strickland just plods forward and doesn't engage much. I'm not a fan of him. He just puts on the most boring fights of all time. He's a fake, a fraud. I think he's acting up there. Sean acts like he's all, I'll go to the death, and then puts on this hillbilly right-wing bogan attitude when he's really just a You ain't gonna fight to the death. You go out there and put it on the line for the last 5 seconds of every fight. You sit there and you walk around like a stupid nutcracker, kicking and punching like an idiot. Do you want to see Luke Rockhold versus Sean Strickland? White is good friends with Tyson, but hates the idea of the boxing legend fighting someone much younger in Paul. He also has an issue with Paul boxing fighters past their prime. Here is what he said: almost 60-year-old man shouldn't be fighting a 27-year-old guy under any circumstances. Even if it's Mike Tyson, it's ridiculous. My biggest problem with the Jake Paul thing and how this plays out is when he actually fought somebody who was a boxer, Tyson Fury, who had the same type of record he has, who was his age, who was his size, he lost. So they're never gonna go that route again, right? White understands the business side of what Paul is doing. The UFC CEO thinks having the fight air on Netflix is smart. Paul was scheduled to face Tyson on July 20th at AT&T Stadium in Arlington, Texas, but the fight was postponed when Tyson was advised by doctors to take a few weeks off after an ulcer flare-up. A new November 15th date was announced Friday for the same location, which will put the matchup on a delay of 4 months. Thank you so much for tuning into today's video. Your dedication and support fuel our passion to bring you the latest and greatest in the MMA world. If you enjoyed today's news, please give us a thumbs up and share it with fellow MMA fans. Remember to subscribe to stay in the loop with daily MMA updates. We've got a lot of exciting news, interviews, and analysis coming your way every single day. Your engagement helps us grow and serve the MMA community even better. Once again, thank you for being an integral part of our daily MMA journey.